We don't decide things based on what we know. We decide things and act based on how we feel. And it's quite a subconscious mechanism. So these acupressure points are sending a signal to your brain that is shifting you to a parasympathetic state. So you're going more parasympathetic, more relaxed, and allowing yourself to calm down from that trigger state. It's because they took that time to take care of themselves. If they hadn't, they might have quit a long time ago. The business might have literally shuttered.
Rachel Hamlin is a mindset coach and somatic healer for high-performing founders and executives. A former brand strategist and product leader, she has worked with companies from Fortune 500s to early-stage Ethereum startups in London, Berlin, and New York. Rachel specializes in addressing chronic stress, helping high performers heal burnout, revitalize their careers, and grow as leaders. Rachel, if there's one message you'd like people to take away from this conversation, what might it be?
Cultivate spaciousness. Yeah, that's the place where you're going to tap into those beautiful resource states, the desires that you feel, the passion that you have, and the future that you're creating. You need the space for that to come through. And further to that, if there's a voice in your head right now that's condemning any of this as woo-woo or too abstract or any other such judgment or doubt, ignore that, because that is the voice that's trying to keep you safe and keep you exactly where you are in those limiting beliefs.
For those who haven't encountered your work yet, perhaps you could share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yep, absolutely. I am an executive coach. I like to say I'm not your standard executive coach. I don't go in and talk to people about smart goals and what are you going to do next and have you done the last thing that you did, right? I kind of look beneath the hood. I look at the emotional underpinnings of a person's problem, and I use tools like breathwork, EFT tapping, and other forms of somatic healing to help people blast through what keeps them stuck and become better leaders and also have a better experience. That is really important to me.
Amazing, amazing. For those who are not clear about what somatic means, could you unpack that concept a little?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's just to do with the body, right? Something that we've learned in recent years in the study of trauma resolution is that one of the most effective ways for us to heal from trauma actually and change our habituated responses to the subject matter of our lives is by using the body, working with the body. And that goes beyond simply exercising and eating, right? There are specific tools that we can use to resolve long-held issues and problems and patterns in our lives.
Now, working with executives and leaders and people in busy professional environments, I'm sure you encounter the phenomenon that is called burnout. And there are many different perspectives on what burnout means. Some suggest that it's not real. It might be a mild form of depression. The World Health Organization has acknowledged it. But nevertheless, burnout is there, and I've experienced this sense of prolonged fatigue, emotional exhaustion. What I'd love to know is what are some of the internal and external drivers of burnout that you've seen in your work?
I love this question. I know that we're all probably a little burnt out on hearing the term burnout, and yet it is as much a topic of conversation today as it was during the pandemic. In fact, I think it's kind of making a comeback to an even stronger degree this time period, 2024, right? And so what's interesting to me about burnout in the context that we're in today is that there are so many macro environmental issues that are causing pressure on us all and on our organizations and our teams that it's very hard to avoid the external factors that cause burnout. And there are actually 6 of them that have been researched and studied by Christina Maslach, who's sort of the preeminent researcher into the phenomenon of burnout. But I'm really more interested myself in addressing the internal drivers because that's the place where we have control. And in the environment that we're in, I unfortunately think it's a little bit of a grass is greener fantasy if you're going to quit your job and hope that you can handle your burnout in a different environment. So just to recap, like the external drivers of burnout are things like lack of autonomy, lack of fairness, breakdown of community, all kinds of systemic and cultural issues that can happen inside organizations and are absolutely fatiguing, deleterious to the spirit, difficult to thrive within, and some of which are actually just stock standard to like your average startup, like overwork,
Yeah.
right? There's pretty much always more work that can be done. And, if you're the founder, it might not feel fair the amount that you have to put in over many years to get your idea to pay off. So I focus a lot more on internal factors because that is at least a place where you have some agency. And the internal factors, the very first place to look is really your self-worth and your sense of satisfaction with your own contribution, right? Like, do you have a daily definition of done? Are you capable of feeling like you've accomplished something that day? Or are you constantly moving the mark on yourself, right? Have you defined your values for your role or for leadership so that you actually have some sort of metrics to live into as a leader? A lot of times people are not really conscious of how they're even measuring themselves. And so they're just sort of moving the mark, forever moving the mark without taking pause and actually reflecting on the ways in which they are contributing or the things that they have accomplished. Additionally, that then leads into how we're willing to advocate for ourselves. If we think of like our self-worth and our perception of ourselves and our contribution as the innermost circle, the next circle is kind of extending into the immediate environment of our team, and the people that we work with and collaborate with day to day. And that first circle is going to impact how you communicate with the next circle, right? Are you able to say, I'm actually going to go offline, for this period of time, and feel good about that, feel confident about sharing that with someone? Are you worried about how you're going to be perceived, right? Do you have the capacity to set boundaries? And I know that's another kind of boring word these days, but it does all start within. So
It's really important. And I've never thought about that idea of done. Maybe you could talk to me a bit about that, because as an entrepreneur, as a founder, it feels like work is never done. And I suppose that's part of something to accept. But there's a form of done where you can at least just stop for the day and relax and recover. Whereas, I'll be quite honest. I try and be really authentic on this podcast. I woke up at 1 a.m. this morning and I was thinking about, I didn't email that person and I've got this to do and I've got that to do. And I'm apparently an expert in resilience and tools to calm the nervous system. And I realized how challenging it can be sometimes. What's the mental shift in saying, okay, that was a good day's work and I'm done?
I think everyone needs to move to Costa Rica and soak up a bit of this Pura Vida life.
I love it.
That's where I'm based. No, but honestly, Brad, I'm someone who's really detoxed from that kind of thinking and have created the capacity to feel complete. I've created the capacity to feel satisfied with my work. And there's multiple factors here, but just taking it from a tactical level, it's like the product manager in me comes out and says, I ship the MVP of any feature I'm going to ship. I'm not trying to ship something perfect. That would be ridiculous. So I had always a definition of done for any given ticket that I issued to my team, right? And it wasn't necessarily the ideal that I had in my head, but it was enough to keep the product or the feature moving forward. And so I think people should apply the same to their day to day. It's like, what are the 3 most impactful items, even if one of them is as simple as emailing someone back, right, on a task that needs to move forward or that you need to unblock, that would have you making a meaningful contribution for this day. And then taking stock of that at the end of each day and like really taking a moment to reflect on the impact that was created by each of those actions.
We often don't reflect on all of the things we did achieve. We focus on all of the things that are unresolved, all of these threads, but they can and should wait for tomorrow. We try and achieve way too much each day. The expectation is that I'll optimistically clear that list every morning. Optimistically clear that list. The reality is it's probably going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you just kind of invert your perspective and say, instead of here's my whole list, here are the 3 things that I am looking forward to accomplishing today, you can't fail. You can move 3 meaningful things forward each day. I used to be that person, right? My to-do list only ever got longer. It was never, ever complete. And so, a byproduct of that is that there are bottom dwellers at the end of your to-do list that actually never get touched and will
Mhm.
linger there for months and months and months and months. And if they're on the to-do list at all, it's of course because I've assigned them some level of importance and I think they matter and I think they need to get done. And in reality, like they don't need to get done because the business is moving forward or my role is moving forward or no one has noticed that they haven't gotten done. And so you just really need to question the truth of your to-do list sometimes.
I like applying that product perspective. And as someone who works leading our resilience lab team at my other role, the Resilience Institute, we have clear lists, Kanban boards. That just put it in the wish list and stop thinking about it for now. Don't let it weigh you
Yes.
down day to day. So applying that approach to life is actually probably an intelligent choice.
Yeah, we're so good at being iterative when it comes to the products that we're building, but when it
Yeah.
comes to our personal contribution, it just never feels like enough.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the high performer's Achilles heel?
I totally believe that the high performer, I mean, they're high performers for a reason. They're amazing. They're all stars. They can do so much. And their Achilles heel is actually their level of competence, right? And so my sort of motto for a high performer, which I bet has a lot of listeners to this podcast, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right? You might be training up a new employee and you can get that spreadsheet done faster than them. So you don't delegate it. Or, you can set up that Facebook ad relatively easily for your colleague who's also your friend. So you do, just to be nice. You can put another meeting in your calendar because technically you have an empty block at that time of day. So you do. But, just because it's easy or it makes someone else happy, or, it's a one-time cost to train your employee versus do it yourself does not mean you should do it, right? You have to learn to forego the instant gratification, right?
Mhm.
Of doing something easy that feels good to check off. You have to forego making other people happy and sort of getting brownie points to be liked. And you have to choose, sometimes the harder thing in the moment of training someone, investing the time in skilling up another person so that in the long run, you're not doing their job anymore, doing their task anymore. Because what you're missing when you get sucked into those behaviors is the opportunity cost, of course, right? Like there's higher order thinking that you could likely be doing that will drive your business much further ahead, much faster than if you're to just continue being hung up on the low hanging fruit that's in front of you day to day.
Could it also be that it's slightly easier and less uncomfortable to do these types of things that we've
Yes.
mastered than that higher order thinking that's going to knock us out of
Yes.
homeostasis?
Yes. Exactly it. Exactly it. And I hope we get to talk about, I have a kind of breakdown of the three types of startup leader that I see. And one of them I think is particularly fallible to that sort of do it later, don't do the hard thing because of the pain of it. It's not
Yes,
easy, obviously.
it's not
The things
easy.
that you really care about. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the productivity myth and how can we divest from it?
Productivity myth, in my view, is that we're only working if we're sat in front of a computer or on a meeting and
Mm,
being accounted for. That one was really hard for me when I was remote and working in a product team. And maybe you've experienced this as well, but feeling like my little green light had to be on and I had to be putting messages in the chat to show that I was there doing my job and performing, right? The productivity myth is that showing face or being in front of the computer is more important than, again, thinking, right? Having spaciousness. I think we may have actually talked about this at some point, Brad. I think you mentioned
yeah.
something on a conversation we had in the past, the importance of spaciousness, right?
Yes.
The importance of rest. I don't believe rest is passive. I believe rest is a place where you're actually actively restoring your spirit and your creativity. And these are huge assets to you in business.
I had a fascinating conversation once with a professor from Harvard. His name is Tal Ben-Shahar. And we were talking about anti-fragility, and muscles are good examples of anti-fragile systems because they grow as a result of pressure. But I said, what is the most important aspect of anti-fragility? And he said one word, which is rest. If you
Yep.
don't rest,
That's so good. Muscles need them too.
yeah. If you don't rest, you're not going to
Yeah.
grow as a result of challenge and intensity. So yeah, I really like that perspective. And we often don't give ourselves the opportunity or the space just to go for a walk in nature and realize that this is probably exactly what we need to crack that difficult challenge.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I get why that is, right? I think that there is a feeling of social pressure and performance pressure, right?
Yeah.
Just an anecdote from one of my girlfriends. She used to work at a very name brand startup, and there was this one woman on her team whose calendar was public, so you could see what she was doing. And she used to put like her soul cycle classes on the calendar and turn down work meetings because she had a spin class to attend. And so you can imagine this rubs some people on the team the wrong way, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
trying to get work done and you're busy going to spin class. Well, that woman went on to be, I think, the only one of that team who got accepted to an Ivy League MBA. So she had her priorities in order, and it paid off in a way that at least that particular group of people really valued, right? She got into one of the most prestigious programs out there, and she was taking care of herself.
Exactly. And it also shows a level of integrity. If you value
Mm-hmm.
fitness and you value self-care and you prioritize it as much as everything else, you are being authentic to yourself. And in my forthcoming book, Start with Values, I talk about, there's an example in there of someone who receives a last minute meeting request from the CEO, but that's the time of her Pilates class. How do you make that decision? Some people would just become extremely stressed and go, oh, work is terrible and blah. But if you can use your values and say, well, I value fitness, that's in the hierarchy of my values. Fitness is number one. That's what I'm going to do. Or maybe there's a level of flexibility and you can say, well, you know what, I could do a YouTube class the hour before and make sure I get to that meeting because it might be quite important, but at least you're clear about it rather than just this vague
Yes.
sense of distress because you're overloaded and
Yes.
overwhelmed. Mm.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Points for having your values defined again. And, we need more leaders. We really badly actually need more leaders who value well-being. And we want more leaders who value well-being. And there are leaders who want to value well-being. I actually read a stat that I came from Deloitte, I believe, that 75% of C-suite executives in their survey were contemplating quitting their jobs to prioritize their well-being.
This episode is brought to you by Start with Values. If you'd like to reduce stress and increase fulfillment in your work and life, then check out startwithvalues.com. There, you'll be able to download the Values app, which helps you to discover your core values and bring them to life through micro habits. There is a values course so that you can learn about the science and practice of core values, and you'll be able to pre-register for my forthcoming book called Start with Values. I hope that these tools will enable you to achieve more fulfillment and make more meaningful decisions on your journey of life. Now back to the episode.
And meanwhile, maybe it was a different survey, maybe it was the same one, something like 82% of executives said that they would prioritize their well-being if they saw other executives doing it. So again, it's like that sort of social pressure, social cueing. And I belong to several product management groups online where sometimes there are women or members who will post anonymously about their burnout, about their fear of discussing the fact that they need to be able to take better care of themselves inside the group. And they are petrified to express it to the people above them. And I don't know if it's because they're in a toxic culture or if it's because we're all just sort of closeting our true desires to take better care of ourselves. It's evident that the desire is there. So the more courage that leaders exhibit to take care of themselves and be transparent about it, the better off we're all going to be. It's very, very, very important. It's like the desire is so there.
And the knock-on effect of caring for yourself and prioritizing well-being is that you are a better leader. This is the thing that people don't quite comprehend. It's like, oh, exercise is another thing to do. No, actually, it might be the thing to do, or
Right.
time in nature or meditation or whatever the practice is for you, that supports your well-being. And that's going to actually make you a calmer, more energized, more focused leader. And who wouldn't want that? But it's connecting the dots. Do you find that in your experience, when a leader integrates well-being practices into their routine, that their performance improves?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, I've helped people who have been on the brink of quitting their jobs or shutting down their businesses, even experiencing health issues, turn the whole thing around, take care of themselves, even take sabbatical in some cases, restructure their businesses, scale up their teams, do whatever they need to do in order to better take care of themselves. And I'll check in with them not only at the end of our coaching engagement, but a year later, 2 years later, and they're thriving, right? They have whole new visions for their businesses. They're growing, businesses doubling, tripling, quadrupling, whatever, year after year. And it's because they took that time to take care of themselves. If they hadn't, they might have quit a long time ago. The business might have literally shuttered.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's critical to performance, honestly. And I think it comes back again to that like instant versus delayed gratification again as well. We live in a culture where that sort of speed of result is really prioritized because I think we're
Yeah.
also addicted to the dopamine and the phones and the things like that. But if you were to start building a gym habit over time or a self-care habit over time, it might not feel good initially. It might not feel like you're seeing the results initially. And it's only after you've invested in that for some time that you really get to see the reward. And it's immense. It's way bigger than if you
Mm.
were to stay stuck in the sort of habits that are a little bit more addictive, like working. Work can
Like
obviously be an
working.
addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And stress. I mean, being stressed is a habit.
And
I'm
stressing.
sure you've encountered this. I've found many executives who say, if I get to work and there's not chaos in my inbox or in Microsoft Teams or Slack,
Mm-hmm.
I create it because I'm
Yep.
so addicted to this intensity.
And you
Yeah.
don't have to give up the intensity. Like that's
Yeah.
the thing I'd like. Maybe this is the one thing I want people to know. It will get there. But it's like you don't have to give up the intensity, but you do have to be able to channel it and to
Yeah.
turn it on and off. And I think that human psychology has more ability to do that than we're taught.
Yeah, we do for sure. So all the talk about well-being is important, but why are some of those best practices for well-being potentially not even worth it unless you've unblocked your emotional resistance?
Yeah, right. The resistance piece is so key. And sometimes we don't realize we have it, right? We know that we need to get 8 hours of sleep and drink so much water and eat a certain way and exercise and all of that. And yet we have these really strongly habituated patterns of working, stressing, tending to the fires in our inbox, that we don't want to give up. And part of that is just really simply that we're habituated to it, right? Like the neural pathways are all converging and running in that direction. And we kind of run on autopilot actually
Yeah.
until we make a
Yeah.
choice to change things. It would be a fallacy to think that you're actually just lazy or, you don't have enough information or something like that, right? You're not lazy if you're scrolling on your phone through like the fifth Instagram carousel of the day telling you about all the well-being practices that you need to be following. Your actions are just emotionally led, not rationally led. Right? Like we don't decide things based on what we know. We decide things and act based on how we feel. And it's quite a subconscious mechanism. So, the
Mm.
first thing you need to do is if let's say you don't have a whole lot of time, but you could start a fitness habit by doing some squats and some push-ups in the morning, right after you brush your teeth, right? People teach habit stacking a lot. Um, that idea might actually engender a feeling of hopelessness because you're like, well, it's not enough, right? Like if I don't have time to actually go to the gym and properly lift weights, I might as well not bother. Right. And so there's a feeling of hopelessness that we need to resolve before you're going to be able to effectively take that action. And then if you look a little bit deeper into that, you might see, well, why are you hopeless about getting an hour to go to the gym? Because you're afraid that your job is actually at risk, right? Like say your company is unstable and you're living in a bit of fight or flight. You're going to need to then resolve for your underlying lack of safety in your role, right? The lack of courage and conviction that you'll be okay or that you can fend for yourself with or without this role. Those are the kinds of emotional underpinnings that are going to carry over into whether you're able to implement a fitness routine, right? For example.
And when we talk about some of these well-being practices, it's not just running or spin
Yeah.
class. What are some of the practices that you've shared with your clients? ranging from body to emotional practices, potentially to mindfulness practices. What have you found to be effective, especially with these high performers who sometimes roll their eyes at what they think are, woo-woo ideas like meditation? Less so now, but
Yeah, I've definitely gotten that. And I have to point out that when we're rolling our eyes at something because it seems woo woo, it's a really sneaky way of our mind also like swatting away something that could be good for us, right? Oh, it's not worth it. It doesn't work. It's woo woo. It's silly, right? It's a really convenient way of keeping us where we are, which is comfortable. So I have to acknowledge that. But I have three go-to practices that are fast acting and effective, some faster than others. So the fastest and simplest is really something that I call embodied hypnosis. And really this is just following, my teacher calls it the meta pattern, which is the meta pattern of all change, which is when you activate you want to activate the pain point or the thing that you're struggling with. So if you're struggling with a feeling of hopelessness that you can't fit in a more robust workout during your work week, and so you're not even going to bother, you want to activate that feeling of hopelessness in your system. Then you want to introduce a pattern interrupt. And so a pattern interrupt is something that's going to break us through the anxiety that we're feeling in that moment and change the way we feel about our problem as we're feeling it. So something like EFT tapping is really good for this because all you have to do is tap on a few points on your body, and you could even just tap on the 2 points on your collarbones. And I don't know if there's video on this podcast, but if you just tap on your collarbones, you're stimulating two tapping points, acupressure points. And these acupressure points are sending a signal to your brain that is shifting you to a parasympathetic state. So you're going more parasympathetic, more relaxed, and allowing yourself to calm down from that trigger state. Then what you want to do is implement the feeling that you'd like to feel instead. And this is why I call it embodied hypnosis, because you want to kind of muster up the feeling that you would feel using your imagination as much as possible if you were already fit, if you were feeling the rewards of your workout routine, if you prioritize yourself on the daily and you had a sense of security in your ability to do that, right? Imagine how confident and secure and healthy and anti-fragile you would feel. You felt those feelings before, most likely, glimpses. And so if you can just imagine that you're feeling that again and kind of plaster that over the idea of going to do your 10 squats and your 20 jumping jacks before you brush your teeth or after, that is going to help you to build the motivation and build the neural pathways that encourage you to do it. So you're feeling the negative feeling, you do a pattern interrupt like tapping, it's a really simple one, and then you go into the future. And you choose a resource state or feeling that you'd be feeling instead. And then you bring that back into like, okay, so what is my next action? And feel that feeling as you imagine feeling the next action. So you start to reprogram the way you feel about doing those 20 squats that previously you'd felt hopeless about. And that's how you make change. So it was kind of a combo of tools because that was like embodied hypnosis, using the meta pattern, and also a little bit of EFT tapping thrown in there. But I'll also isolate EFT tapping separately because that's something you could do any time of day when you're feeling stress. A pattern interrupt when you're feeling stress is a powerful way to start changing the way that you feel about that particular trigger, whether it's a text message from your boss or, finding out that something's gone off the rails or there's a bug and it's in production or whatever it is, right? Just tapping is going to start to shift you into that parasympathetic state of being, and you can do it during your workday. So that beats going for a run because you don't even need to leave your computer. You can stay in the flow of your productivity, right? And with your team.
Absolutely. And any other practices? What are your thoughts around meditation?
I love meditation, but I recognize how hard that is for someone who has zero practice and is really jacked up on cortisol and adrenaline. And so, for that reason, I actually prefer breathwork to meditation because breathwork kind of hacks you into a meditative state. And if you practice it regularly, especially longer format sessions, you're going to actually be training your resiliency. I'm sure you know this, right? Training your nervous system and the controller of your stress response to be able to withstand more stress. So that you then maybe do have a chance of actually sitting in stillness and meditating someday. And when you get to that point, meditation is a beautiful tool for purely training and channeling your consciousness. We talk about channeling intensity. I heard someone say the other day that meditation is not suited for people who have a lot of energy. And I think, on the contrary, meditation is beautiful for people who have a lot of energy because they need to learn how to wield it with focus. And meditation is just about training your focus. It's a discipline practice.
So you can apply those principles that you use in everyday life to stay hyper productive and hyper focused, but just internally. That's the difference. It's just noticing your thoughts and focusing on your breathing, and you'll develop your attention control as a result, which leads me to an interesting one. Do you think that many leaders, and I suppose this is an observation partly of myself, suffer from forms of ADHD, attention deficit disorders? Are we training ourselves to become attention deficit just through all of this technology that's vying for our attention?
Such a great inquiry. I don't know. It certainly seems that way, right? Like, observationally, that it certainly seems to be true. I don't have the data on this. I've not read up on the psychology around this. I do think that a lot of entrepreneurs might have been born ADHD or grown up ADHD, however that works, especially the creative types, right? There's definitely patterns and themes that present. But I also understand that we're just like a culture of distraction, right? The entire world is struggling with just the addiction to the phone and the notifications. So it feels like maybe a little bit of both. We're both training ourselves into it, and also entrepreneurs index higher to be ADHD just because of those are the types of people that are drawn to working for themselves, possibly.
Yeah, the pioneers. They tend to like to focus on lots of things and not necessarily get them done. That's why you need every pioneer needs a good driver to get things done behind the scenes. Yes, it's very true.
Can't be fenced in.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on tools like visualization?
Huge for me because visualization is so effective and so pleasurable. Like, visualization is part of what makes my life worth living, right? Like, I spend half my time, I mean, that sounds a little sad, but I live in Costa Rica. I'm in this very beautiful place in nature, but it's very quiet and it's very peaceful. So even if I've tapped out, I hit my daily definition of done, I have a wildly productive day, I will still have chunks of time where there's just no distraction and nothing for me to do. And at that point, I'll even have done my breathwork practice, I'll have done my meditation, I'll have done my beach walk. I still have time and space here because it's just, that's my environment. And the reason I love visualization is because it allows me to tap into fantasy. It allows me to tap into my imagination. It allows me to fulfill myself with whatever I could possibly want in the now. So it's kind of like similar to how I was teaching the embodied hypnosis technique. It's resourcing myself from the future. If I want to feel excited, if I want to feel like I'm, having the adrenaline rush of speaking on a stage or working with a big new client that I hadn't anticipated working with, or being flown out to some location for work, whatever it is that feels exciting, I can experience it in the moment. And when you do that, I think studies have shown that your mind doesn't really differentiate between what's real and what's your imagination. And so it basically helps you to program yourself to become more of the person who is having those experiences, and to show up again with the confidence, the courage, the security, the anti-fragility that you need to take yourself down that road. I actually had a really powerful visualization of basically my life as it is today. I visualized a home very similar to the one that I was living in, that I am living in. And I visualized my LinkedIn being open and active in a way that it wasn't at the time. And it's really interesting to me that a little over a year later, I'm living that vision without having tried to bring it to fruition, especially because certain details of it, like the home that I live in here in Costa Rica, this is a very rare home. It's a 1-bedroom, it's modern, it's new. There's very little, if anything else like this on the housing market where I live. So it's fascinating to me that I steered myself into that vision unconsciously. It was such a powerful vision that was so felt and so exciting to me at the time.
I mean, I have read many Joe Dispenza books, and he talks about that quantum field of potential and other concepts, which I know that those out there who are, it must be researched and evidence-based go, how can you believe in this stuff? But how can you not when quantum physicists say when you dive deep enough, things get spooky, I think is the term that they use. Yeah. It's interesting to consider that it might actually, there may be some type of attraction, law of attraction.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to explain. We can't describe if there is a law, it's very hard to
Yeah.
explain to perfection, right? It doesn't
Mm,
seem to work with the consistency of a law for most people. And there's various people who are out there trying to explain it and break it down and systematize it, but that hasn't been cracked yet.
yes.
And yet many people, I think, have had experiences where,
Mm,
the word manifestation is a shadow word. We don't use that in the professional world very much, but a lot of people are interested in it. Again,
yeah.
just like a lot of executives are wanting to prioritize their well-being. A lot of people are curious about this manifestation thing and have even experienced some form of it, right?
Mm,
So I love Joe Dispenza and the fact that he's doing his best to measure things, measuring the field around the heart. And yeah.
exactly. We often do that for ourselves, but why wouldn't a leader do that for their business? Of course, we
Yeah.
have a business plan, which is a kind of very boring, dry form of visualization. It is in a way,
Yes,
really.
it is.
But why wouldn't we do it in a more vibrant, colorful way? Actually, imagine the feeling of being part of that team that ships that product that users love, and imagine them clicking the screen or whatever it is that you do. But for me,
Yes.
when I do that, suddenly the emotions change. And you mentioned at the beginning goal setting and all of that, like SMART goals and all of
Mm.
those kind of traditional coaching techniques are not really what you do. If someone was to connect with you and say, "Hey, Rachel, coach me," I but I just don't believe it's possible. What the thing that I want, I've got self-limiting beliefs. They probably wouldn't say it like that, but
Mm.
I just don't
Yeah.
believe it's possible. I can't. What would you say to them? Where would you
Mm.
start?
Oh, I would say, okay, so firstly, it would be really cool if they could say I've got self-limiting beliefs, so that's why I feel
Yeah,
this way.
yeah,
And probably if they feel that they can't, they wouldn't even reach out to me in the first place. But you can do literally anything. I mean, this is my most plucky and Pollyanna-ish American belief that I have, is that we can all do anything. To me, that is just a fact. And so, the first thing I would say is to look for other people who you can relate to, even in the slightest form, especially in places that you feel are your areas of weakness. So let's say that you're a woman and you don't see any other female leaders in your industry who are really making a mark yet. Try to find someone like a woman in an adjacent industry or a similar industry who is leading the kind of life or career that you might like to be leading, and use them to build your belief that what you want is possible. Borrow other people to help you, because it's really through these insane examples. And I'm sure you've heard the 4-minute mile example, right? That one's kind of used at this point, of like someone setting a new mile, a new record, and then other people being able to follow suit. Well, there's another really cool one that I heard the other day on LinkedIn. I have to shout out Brian Smith because he shared this and I've never heard this one before. But Tony Hawk spent 10 years trying to perfect some kind of seemingly physically impossible trick on the
yeah.
skateboard. And he got to the X Games one year and tried that same trick like 9 times, landing flat on his face in the same X Games. And on the 10th time, he actually nailed it. He broke history. He went into all the record books. He did this trick that everyone thought was impossible. And now, what do you know? People today, other people who are not the legend that is Tony Hawk, can do this trick.
Yeah.
So finding evidence from other people that what you want is possible, especially when you relate on something that you think is a weakness or a reason that you can't, can be just a small way to shift and open your mind to the fact that it might be possible to you too. That's where I'd begin.
I love that. And that's where podcasting can be so powerful, because you may not meet these people in your everyday life, but they're out there and they're talking about
Yes.
their experiences and sharing their experiences. I've met so many incredible people through this podcasting pursuit, who came from really challenging backgrounds and have been knocked around through the course of their life, and yet they find a way. And without hearing those stories, you might not believe it's possible. I still look at people who've built a $100 million business and just go, that is, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But if you follow the
Mm.
steps, they just made some good decisions at the right time and believed in themselves and got the right team around them. And I heard about someone, who was it? It was Grant Cardone. I was talking to someone yesterday who loves Grant Cardone and is one of
Mm-hmm.
his master coaches. And he told me the story about how he dropped himself into a city in the US under with a fake name and $100. And within 90 days, he had
Mm.
generated 9 million or something.
I think they made a TV show about that, actually, that
That's
Grant
right.
Cardone is in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which
That's
is really good. I've been wanting to watch that again. But something that came up for me as you were sharing, you mentioned like someone who's built $100 million company. And I was immediately turned off because I have no
yeah.
desire to build $100 million company. Now, you might be someone who is like, oh, I don't believe I can build $100 million company, but like deep down, you kind of wanna. And so your
Mm-hmm.
reaction might be, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't have the skills. I've never done this before, whatever. But there's a difference between how you feel and how I feel, which is like there's a little bit of some part of you that's drawn to it. That is actually really important information, right? If you can feel a spark of desire for something, no matter how far away it may feel, to me, that is an indicator that is something for you to pursue because that spark of desire is precious. Like feeling passion is precious. It gives you the energy that you need to like go through all the experimentation and the obstacles and the highs and lows that any given journey that's worthwhile in this life will bring you on. And so I always take that a little bit as like a signal. There's meaning and there's value in your desire. And so regardless of whether you believe it's possible for you, take that signal seriously and trust it and know that it's like, it's actually really a resource for you to use.
I really feel that one because over the course of my life, I've had these like tickles or itches of real passion and something that I feel is important. And people say it's crazy. I remember people laughing at me when I said, oh, I'm going to write a book. And people just, I had friends who would just go, yeah. Or I think I might start a podcast. But it was something that was there. And every time I've followed my curiosity, it's turned into something amazing. And people forget that.
Yes. It's so cool too, because it doesn't even mean that you have to write a book, although you did, which is really cool. But it could just be that it's going to lead you to your next big venture or your next partnership or your
Yes.
next whatever. Right? It's like a breadcrumb. It's taking you somewhere.
Yes, that's a really good point. You don't have to achieve that thing, but just follow that path because it could lead to
Yes.
something amazing in the future. And actually, I
Yes.
wanted to write fiction novels, right? I still will. I've got one that's almost ready. But along the way, I encountered a publisher who's helping me publish my forthcoming nonfiction, Start with Values,
Yes.
and it'll be distributed by Penguin Random House, which may actually help me get the credibility to publish my fiction novel later on. So
There
it's
you go.
interesting the way life works. Do the creative things. Any tips for reconnecting with your passions?
Spaciousness, to take us back to one of the
Yes.
earlier threads in this conversation. Yeah, you won't even be able to feel passion gets shut down under pressure. Passion gets shut down under stress. We don't have access to it if we're
Yeah.
constantly in these like cortisol or adrenaline hijack states or fight or flight. So, the first place to start is very simply before you even bother with breath work or tapping or any of the other stuff I talked about. Yeah, just having some time in nature, some time without your phone, some time for other parts of yourself to emerge that you maybe haven't heard from in a while, and doing that routinely until you find access again. And then breathwork is a really great, again, quite a fun hack sometimes into that, the part of yourself that has passion.
Yes. And for someone just starting off, how would you suggest they explore breathwork?
There's so many great resources on YouTube. I am partial to the channel Breathwork Beats.
Okay.
They're really great. I mean, you can just do a few like very short segments, 10 minutes, and you will notice that you do what they say, you alter your state. And you'll probably be curious to try more of it. And then you can go and you can, just scrolling around Instagram, doing some hashtag searches, whatever keyword searches for breathwork near you. Just go where you feel called, right? Go to facilitators who feel like a match for you, who you like for whatever reason and resonate with. There's meaning in that too, right? If you're vibing with a person's energy and expression, you'll probably enjoy their classes or their other offerings. And yeah, that's where I would say, see where it leads you. All those breadcrumbs there too.
Tell me about healing the wounds of the high performer.
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of like, I think there's a kind of core theme with the high performer, which is the first thing we talked about, of just never feeling enough or never feeling like they've done enough. And so, the place to start with that is just to gut check that statement, right? Like, I'm enough, I've done enough. How far away do you feel from that being true, especially at the end of a given day?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us have that hungry ghost going on. And the hungry ghost is a concept from Buddhism that, Brad, I feel like you're probably familiar with, where, the hungry ghost can never get full. And the Buddhists teach it around materialism and consumption, right? It can't get enough, can't get enough. And the same is true for accomplishment. And so, if that's something that you're struggling with, for me, I've really, really enjoyed somatic healing for this. Practices like breathwork, to a lesser degree, tapping, somatic experiencing, maybe. What else comes to mind? Do you have any other somatic practices that come to mind that have helped you get into your body in particular to like feel yourself below the neck?
Well, surfing, high intensity exercises, things like that where I'm pushing myself to the limit and breathing fully. I think most of the benefit from high intensity exercise actually comes from the inhale and exhale and oxygenating your bloodstream. So things like that really get my heart beating.
Beautiful. Yeah, I like that. Anything that points you into really being able to actually feel your physicality.
Yeah.
Because the more you can feel your body, and I'll just share, I've been experimenting with breathwork a lot this past week. And one of the great gifts of it is the more I breathe, the deeper I relax and the heavier I start to feel, to the point where it's just like so delicious to be like resting there on the bed. And it's like, I don't even want to like wiggle a toe. I'm so landed and in my body in this like physical meat suit. That's how you can then feel the sensation of fullness. Like you need access to your body to feel some of these sensations that when you're always in your mind fixating on your to-do list, you will not be able to feel. It's about getting out of the head, which worries, tells you that you haven't done enough, thinks about what's next, and into the body where those worries really like don't exist.
Who or what inspires you?
Oh, that's such a great question. Wait, I have to think about that. Who or what inspires me? I'll tell you the first thing that came to mind because we talked about it, surfing.
Really?
Just surfing and getting that insane energy high and the level of just desire for life, excitement, enjoyment of delight that I'm here, that I have a body, that I can surf, that the waves and the jungle exist is like, there's nothing like it for me. And so, that kind of just energizes me for whatever I'm doing in a given day. And then in terms of what I want to do with my life and where I get my vision from, that's actually something I'm grappling with lately, and I don't have a great answer for. It's part of why I'm considering moving back to the United States, because the ambitious part of me is a little bit hard to locate here in Costa Rica. And I know she's still there. So I guess my answer is that it's being in the right environment, actually, right? Being in a place where I'm inspired by the people around me and I can kind of soak it up secondhand. It's part of what really feeds me.
Amazing. Do you see your time in Costa Rica almost as the yin to the yang of being in that high intensity environment in the US?
I think it has certainly helped me to lock in the learnings I've been sort of landing and cultivating over the last few years of, being more yin, being more able to accept myself, my productivity, not having to push so hard, but being able to be productive from a really just healthy intrinsic desire to. So yeah, in a way, yes, I think it has helped me anchor that.
Have you always been interested in self-development and personal growth?
I think so. Yeah, I think when I was a teenager, I can remember being like, wow, we can change our lives. We can become happier people. It's amazing. I don't know what I was learning, but I do remember having a bit of that spirit when I was young. Yes.
Well, you're certainly sharing it in your online presence. Your LinkedIn is amazing. So for people out there who wish to connect with you, where would you like them to go?
Love for people to visit me on LinkedIn. I am on there every day, Rachel Hamlin. And I am also developing a new resource that should be live by the time this podcast airs. And that will be at rachel-hamlin.com/leadership-type. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's going to be a short quiz where you get to assess what type of leader you are. We didn't get to touch on that today, but there's 3 types of startup leaders that I see. And I get to go a little bit into the shadows and the superpowers of each of those leaders and how you sort of healthfully integrate the shadow aspects and exist and lead from more of the gifts with greater energy and greater focus and actually greater productivity and less burnout and stress in the end. So that would be a great resource for anyone who enjoyed this podcast to use.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely include those links in the show notes, and perhaps that's a conversation for another time.
There will be guided visualizations in that resource as well. I should mention.
Are they
you
really?
Actually hit the, yeah, you hit exactly what I was doing, like visualizing the team, visualizing very like product or business specific, desires and goals. So
there we go. There we go.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Any final thoughts for those people who stuck with us all the way to the end?
Thank you for sticking with us. And no, I feel like I've said everything I need to say. Thank you, Brad. This was an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You're a force for good. And yeah, I found you on LinkedIn and was very inspired by your content. And that's why I reached out and thought, share your wise words with our audience. So thank you.
No. Yeah, I'm so glad you did. It's really been a joy.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in the next episode.